Margaret's voice sliced through the warmth of Christmas Eve dinner like a shard of ice. Isabella, I need an answer. Who are those people living in the mountain chalet I purchased for you 3 years ago? The crystal glass she set down hard on the table didn't shatter, but the silence that followed broke something far more fragile. Beyond the windows, snow drifted peacefully onto the evergreens, while inside, the air had turned to frost. Across the table, my father Ryan froze mid-laugh, his fork suspended in the air. My mother Elizabeth went rigid, her eyes flooding with a fear I had never witnessed in her before. I sat there trembling in my lightweight sweater, completely lost. I glanced between my grandmother and my parents. "Grandma," I said softly, my voice barely holding together. "What chalet are you talking about?" I had been renting a damp basement unit on the east side my entire adult life. Property ownership had never once been part of my reality. Grandma's gaze sharpened into something lethal. She didn't look at me. Her eyes went straight to my parents. "You told me you were managing it on her behalf. You said the tenants were temporary and that every dollar was going into a trust for her." My father laughed nervously, the sound completely hollow. "Mother, you've been overseas for years. You're misremembering things. It's being used as a corporate retreat. We lease it out to offset costs until Isabella is ready for it." "No," Grandma said firmly, her tone rising. "I drove out there yesterday. The people inside told me they are the in-laws of your daughter, Sydney. They said they wire $6,000 every month directly to Ryan Hansen." The room tilted. $6,000 a month. My checking account had $15 in it. I looked at my sister, Sydney. She was dressed in a cashmere sweater that cost more than my entire closet. She turned white and looked desperately toward our mother, begging silently for someone to step in. In the past, I would have dissolved into tears. I would have wondered what I had done wrong. For 26 years, I had been the family's unlucky one, the one who couldn't manage money, the one who needed rescuing. I had believed them completely. I had absorbed their story about me so deeply that I genuinely thought my inability to get ahead was my own character flaw. That had been the invisible chain around my throat. The constant quiet suggestion that I was broken and they were my salvation. But staring at my father's clammy forehead and my mother's wide, terrified eyes, that chain snapped clean. This wasn't misfortune. This wasn't my incompetence. This was robbery. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't overturn anything. Instead, the room came into sharp focus around me, every edge crisp and clear. A cold calm moved through me like ice water replacing blood. I picked up my napkin, folded it carefully, and set it beside my plate. "Dad," I said, my voice level and quiet, "did you sign a lease with Brandon's parents using my name?" "It's not that simple, Bella," my mother Elizabeth cut in, her voice climbing into a high, anxious register. "We were protecting the asset. You know how easily paperwork overwhelms you. We didn't want to put that pressure on you." "Answer what I asked," I said, cutting through her words. "Did you forge my signature on a lease for a property I didn't know existed?" The silence was deafening. Sydney dropped her fork and it struck the china with a sharp crack, the sound of something pristine beginning to break. "Nobody forged anything," Sydney said defensively, her jaw lifting. "You signed a power of attorney years back, don't you remember? After your car accident?" I stared at her. The same accident where they had claimed they were too financially stretched to help with my medical bills. The accident that had destroyed my credit rating. They had used my most vulnerable moment as a tool to strip away my future. "I revoked that power of attorney the day I turned 25, I said. It was a lie. I hadn't done it. But I needed to watch their faces. My father flinched. That single involuntary movement told me everything. These weren't just negligent parents. They were criminals. And I was no longer their daughter sitting at the table. I was the person about to hold them accountable. "Let's talk about what the word burden actually means," I said, my voice measured but carrying venom beneath every syllable. "I live in a basement apartment. When it rains, it smells like mold. I drive a car that stops working whenever the temperature drops. I am carrying $40,000 in medical debt from an accident you refused to help me with." My mother pressed a napkin to her lips, her gaze scanning the room as if searching for an exit. "We did help you when you first moved out," she whispered. "You paid the deposit," I corrected. $500, one time 4 years ago. I turned to Sydney. She was tapping at her phone beneath the table, probably scrubbing a location tag from her latest post. "Sydney," I said, and she jolted. "What is the monthly rent on your downtown condo?" "That has nothing to do with you," she snapped back. "Actually, it does," I replied, "because I saw the bank statements on Dad's desk last Christmas. $3,200 a month covered by the Hanson Family Trust. The same trust that apparently had nothing left over for my physical therapy." Ryan's face went a deep, mottled red. "We have to maintain a certain image, Isabella. Sydney is building something real. That requires investment. You chose graphic design. We told you it wasn't a practical path. And that justifies stealing $1 million property from me?" I asked. "To fund her image?" "We didn't steal anything," Ryan said, slamming his hand on the table and rattling every piece of silverware. "We managed it. After the accident, you were a mess, depressed, anxious. We couldn't hand you that kind of responsibility. We rented it to protect it, to cover its upkeep." "Protect it," Grandma Margaret repeated, her voice dropping to something slow and dangerous. "You charged Brandon's parents $6,000 a month. That is $72,000 per year. Over 3 years, that exceeds $200,000. She leaned forward and fixed her eyes on Ryan. "Where is that money, Ryan? Is it safe? Or is it parked in the driveway wearing a Range Rover badge?" The silence that followed was suffocating. I looked at my parents without the filter of family loyalty for the very first time, and what I saw was this. They were not simply selfish people. They had depended on my failure. They had needed me to be the struggling one so they could feel justified in taking what belonged to me. My smallness had fed their largeness. "You owe me," I said, my voice slicing cleanly through the room. "Every cent of rent, every cent of interest, and the deed. Starting tonight." "We can't," Elizabeth finally broke, her composure collapsing. "The money is gone." "Gone?" Grandma Margaret repeated the word as though she were examining something foreign. $200,000 is gone? "Maintaining our life costs money," Ryan shouted, dropping every pretense of calm. "Do you understand what it takes to belong in these circles? The club fees, the vehicles, the travel. There are expectations placed on this family. We did it for both of you girls," Elizabeth cried, clutching at her necklace. "So you could have the right connections. So you could marry into good situations." "You mean so Sydney could?" I said evenly. "I was never part of that plan. I was just the cost of running it." "You were always so difficult," Ryan said, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Always too emotional, too sensitive. We knew you would throw the money away on something impractical. We were preserving the asset for the family's future." Grandma Margaret rose from her chair slowly. She looked at Ryan with an expression I had never seen directed at anyone. Not fury, but something heavier. Deep, irreversible disappointment. "You lied to everyone," she said softly. "But most of all, you lied to yourselves. You persuaded yourselves that robbing your own child was an act of care, that crushing her future was a form of protection. That is not a mistake, Ryan. That is a sickness." "We are not sick." Sydney shot up from her chair, eyes blazing. "We were surviving. You don't understand the pressure, Grandma. Isabella would have wasted everything. She doesn't understand how the real world functions." "I understand how it functions quite well," I said, standing to face her. "I know that in the real world you don't falsify documents, you don't steal from your own family, and you don't spend years convincing someone they're incapable just so you won't have to feel guilty about what you took from them." I looked at my mother. "You told me I was unlucky. You told me I just didn't have the instincts for money. You made me believe I was defective so that you could keep living comfortably without carrying any guilt about how you were doing it." Elizabeth sobbed louder, but it wasn't the sound of genuine remorse. It was the sound of someone terrified of what came next. "I am done being the family's excuse," I said, "and I am done being your source of income." Grandma Margaret lifted her phone and spoke 2 words into it. "It's time." The heavy dining room doors swung open, and a cold gust of wind carried snowflakes into the room ahead of a figure in a dark coat. Mr. Walter entered, brushing snow from his shoulders. He did not look like someone joining a holiday gathering. He looked like Consequences wearing a tailored suit. He carried a leather briefcase and set it on the sideboard with a weight that commanded the room. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying no warmth whatsoever. "There is some business we need to address." Ryan's color drained instantly. "Walter, this is a private family dinner." "Not anymore," Mr. Walter replied, snapping open the briefcase latches. "Mrs. Margaret Hanson engaged my services 1 week ago. We have been thorough." He extracted a series of documents and arranged them on the table beside the untouched holiday roast. "The first exhibit," he said, sliding a page toward Sydney, "is a deed transfer for the Alpine Chalet dated 3 years ago, bearing Isabella Hanson's name. Or, more precisely, bearing the name of someone imitating her handwriting." He produced a second document, a forensic analysis confirming the signature was not authentic, and bore a strong resemblance to the handwriting of Sydney Hanson Miller. Sydney inhaled sharply and shrank into her seat. "I only did what Dad told me to do." Mr. Walter continued without acknowledging the outburst. He slid a thick folder of bank records toward Ryan. "The second exhibit covers the Hanson Family Trust account activity. We tracked every rental payment from the chalet. None of it was allocated to savings or property maintenance. It went toward a Range Rover lease, a social media marketing program, and a series of transfers to a cryptocurrency platform that no longer exists." Ryan folded into his chair. The documentation was airtight. Every transaction cataloged in precise black and white. "And the final exhibit," Mr. Walter said, lowering his voice slightly, "is this." He withdrew a single document in a clear protective sleeve. It was scorched at the edges and yellowed with age. "We recovered this from the contents of a safe deposit box your father cleared out this morning. He appears to have missed it. He passed it to me." My hands shook as I took it. It was a letter from the Parsons School of Design, dated 5 years earlier. "Dear Isabella," I read aloud, my voice barely audible. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected to receive a full merit scholarship." I looked up, tears blurring everything in front of me. "You told me I was rejected. You told me I wasn't talented enough." "We couldn't let you go," Elizabeth burst out. "We needed you here. Who would have looked after everything? Who would have been there for us?" "You burned my future," I said quietly. "You kept me small on purpose. You kept me struggling because it served you." The weight of it hit me all at once. Every year of self-doubt, every ramen dinner, every bill I couldn't pay, none of it had been the result of my own shortcomings. It had been engineered. They had deliberately constructed my limitations to sustain their own comfort. I looked at Mr. Walter. "What are my options?" "Civilly," he said, "we pursue fraud, embezzlement, and emotional damages. Criminally, forgery and grand larceny carry substantial prison sentences." Ryan looked up with desperation in his eyes. "Bella, please. You would not send your own father to prison." I looked at the charred letter in my hands. It carried the faint smell of old smoke, the scent of the life they had taken from me. I'd looked at the luxury surrounding me, every piece of it purchased with what should have been mine. "I wouldn't," I said. "But the district attorney might?" The room erupted. "It was entirely her idea," Ryan shouted, thrusting a finger at Elizabeth. "She's the one who said Isabella would leave us. She burned that letter." "You coward," Elizabeth screamed back, her composure completely gone. You're the one who lost everything on those reckless investments." "Dad told me to sign the deed," Sydney wailed, tears carving through her makeup. "He said it was standard paperwork. He told me Isabella already knew." They were tearing each other apart, each one scrambling to escape the consequences they had all chosen together. "Enough," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through all of it. They went still and looked at me. "I don't care who came up with it first," I continued. "You all benefited. Every single one of you lived well while I was eating cheap food in a moldy apartment. You all watched me drown and chose to look away." I faced Mr. Walter. "Show me the total." He handed me the document. I placed it in front of Ryan. $2,400,000, I said. That covers the rent, interest, punitive damages, and compensation for the scholarship you destroyed. Ryan stared. We don't have anything close to that. Then you will sell everything, I said without hesitation. The vehicles, the jewelry, the memberships, and you will be out of the chalet tonight. Tonight, Elizabeth whispered. But it's Christmas. There's a blizzard outside. I know, I said. I walked here through it. Now you can walk out into it. 1 year later, the fireplace in the Alpine chalet crackled warmly. Outside, snow was falling steady and quiet over the mountain slopes. Inside, the air was calm and still. I sat in a large armchair with a sketchbook resting on my knees, nearly finished with the design for a new community center. What's on your mind? Grandma Margaret asked, lowering a mug of hot chocolate into my hands. Just noticing how quiet everything is, I said, and smiled. Peace has a price, she said. But you paid it yourself. Ryan and Elizabeth were awaiting trial on fraud charges. Sydney had filed for bankruptcy. Her marriage to Brandon had ended. They had all exited my life completely and for good. But I hadn't simply held on to what was recovered. The scholarship program launches tomorrow, I said. The Phoenix Fund. For students whose families tried to ground them before they could fly. Grandma nodded. We already have 300 applicants, I said. Young people who were told they weren't enough. Kids whose education money was spent by the very people who were supposed to protect them. People who just needed one person to believe in them. I looked out at the snow settling over the pine trees beyond the glass. I wasn't only a person who had survived something. I was someone building something. I was taking every brick that had been hurled at me and using it to lay a foundation for others. You did something remarkable, Bella, Grandma said. You turned something that was meant to destroy you into something that protects others. Not exactly, I said, closing the sketchbook. I turned a cage into a key.